We need to choose a weapon to fight through waves of enemies. Maybe a sword or an axe, possibly a magic staff or a book. Nah, let's use an edgy Rubik's Cube. It's Rel, and let's explore GrandChase. Before we dive in, I wanted to mention that I kinda just threw out many pages of my typical script, because quite frankly, it was negative and boring. Which is quite odd, because I enjoyed my time playing GrandChase. So I'm going to try another method to write this, one that better gets across my experience with the game. We'll start with why the original script wasn't interesting. The story. The concept for the story is fine. Super powerful witch is defeated by the GrandChase. Unfortunately, a rift is opened, throwing them into the abyssal path. Where it falls short is the execution. The first issue is how formulaic it is. Every world I visited followed the same pattern. GrandChase arrives, meets a local who is dealing with a minion of the witch. They can't do it alone, so they join the GrandChase, defeat the minion, and we get a new lead. The story also isn't helped by how disconnected it is from both gameplay and player agency. On the gameplay side, the dialogue doesn't connect to the mechanics of the game. A little bit with the set dressing, but you don't learn anything about the enemy moves or any of their mechanics by reading the dialogue. And on the player agency side, you don't get to make any choices, which is fine. Branching dialogue is a ton of work. But the problem is that unless you pick one of 3 characters, you aren't even present in the story. You might get added in later, but who knows how long it will take, if it even happens. The last issue might just be a me issue, but the constant bickering between the 3 leads just wasn't enjoyable for me. It's to the point where I honestly don't feel like you lose much if you just skip all the dialogue. Alright, setting story issues aside, if I liked the game, why is my original script so negative? Polish. The game felt like it had almost no quality control on it. To the point that less than 3 minutes into my original script, I had to write, for the sake of time, I'm gonna leave small text issues alone for the rest of the video. Just know that the game has a ton of them. I'm gonna give you a few examples that, while not game-breaking, just show a lack of care, upkeeping, attention to detail, etc. First up, picking my screen name. Literally 25 seconds into my recording. Rel is available. Nice. Unless, of course, their availability checker is broken. The text wrapping, or lack thereof. Leaving Amy to be a gangster with her G mode. Alright, let's jump into the first tutorial mission. And hold up. What did that say? Cursing ovary? What did the incorrectly spelled ovary do to deserve this? The game just doesn't understand how to properly scale the spacing of its objects. Look, they have some French translators working on the text. Move towards the blech portal. There's a giant flashing arrow pointing and saying right, clearly indicating I should walk to the right. But the directions say to move to the portal and click down. Visuals, you're giving me some conflicting signals here. After going through that portal? Nope. After going through the portal, we are immediately greeted by the Nightmaster, saying you can't use this function during the tutorial. What function? I didn't click anything since I went through the portal. I get a text box covering up the lower portion of the screen, and a monster I can't see because of it attacks me. At least the game has the courtesy to acknowledge that was stupid. The healing tutorial says, press QERNT key. That's a big key you got there. And yes, that one's pedantic, but the mental image I got was too funny. It should be keys, or switch the and to an or. I do know what the game meant, but those hotbar slots aren't bound to anything, let alone healing potions. And that's all moot anyway, because the attack dealt me 2 damage out of my 364 health. Yes, tutorialize healing, but make it believable. These kinds of things aren't just random flukes 20 hours in. They're at the very start of the game. And the number of issues is staggering. I'm leaving tons of them out. None of them make the game impossible. They just feel careless, and like the game wasn't playtested at all. So, the game's a mess. Why keep playing? The short of it, I was having fun. And where did that fun come from? The gameplay. Now, that's not to say it's perfect. Plenty of small issues with it. But the overall vibe was really charming, and honestly, very well balanced. The character variety is fantastic. We have 3 different types. MP characters, who focus on using the auto attack button and charging up combos, and apparently changing jobs, though I never raised an MP character high enough that mattered. They weren't really my thing. The hybrid characters, like the swashbuckler I started out with, which, as the name suggests, are a mix of MP characters, and the last type, the edgelords. Okay, technically called AP characters, but I mean, look at these aesthetics. The weapon names are Ultima, Eye Teeth, or my pick, Cube. If you decide to go with Soul Reaper, you better not try approaching him. As much as I joke about the vibe of the AP characters, their ability-focused playstyle was my personal favorite. Both between and within each category, there's a wonderful diversity of abilities and attacks, to the point that I ended up playing a bunch of different characters just because I wanted to see what their abilities felt like. The other thing that really made me stick with the game was the combat. It was slow and clunky. Wait a minute, those aren't positive terms. Yeah, I know. And yet somehow it worked for the game. The attacks and abilities have wonderful visuals. Most of them have a really great feeling of impact. There's clearly a lot of care put into making them enjoyable. While the animations lock you in for what feels like forever, and sometimes they feel like they lock you in longer than the animation shows, they're extremely consistent. And after a few minutes on each character, every hit I took felt like it was my own fault. And that fairness extended to the difficulty of the game as well. Aside from the very early levels, damage and enemy numbers felt incredibly well balanced. It wasn't long before the game put up walls to prevent auto-attack spam and button mashing from getting you through levels, though very, very early game enemies could be stagger locked, which was honestly kind of funny. I eventually got to the point where I would have to replay levels to learn enemy attack patterns, which I loved. Now, part of that is that I refused to use potions, partly because the game's bad tutorial for them, and partly because I enjoyed having to learn enemy attack patterns. And honestly, after doing it, I can recommend trying the game without them. It was really fun. And I know I might hit a wall eventually, but I never really got to a point where I couldn't get past by getting better at the game. For experienced players, do you guys ever run into places where you have to start potion chugging? On to the slowness of the attacks and animations. They often made the game feel like 1/4 or 1/8 turn-based. I had that extra part of a second to plan my next move, compared to faster-paced games. Something about it made it feel more strategic than spammy. If you lock yourself into the wrong animation, you'll get punished for it. Choose the right one, get rewarded. There are a million other things I could say about this game, both positive and negative, but mentioning every little one would make this video very long, and honestly, is unnecessary to do. So instead, I'll mention a few more in no particular order, and then we'll get to our conclusion. I typically try to avoid MTX in games, and I was able to have hours of fun in GrandChase without spending anything. But the game looks like it has an absolute mess of microtransactions. And if I had to take a guess, there's going to be a point where I hit a wall, be it endgame bossing, PvP, or something else. Though I would need experienced players to tell me where it is. I also wanted to talk about gearing. It's as easy as clicking the item with the green arrow on it. However, I did notice that equipping some green items lowered my health. So the green arrow actually indicates a higher combat rating, which is a combination of a number of stats. So more accurately, the green arrow is a good starting point for beginners. But if you want to optimize, look a little closer at the stats. When completing missions, we are placed into a new room for the map we just cleared, and that suggests, to me, a heavy grind focus. At this point, I'd much prefer to be sent to the map or to the next story dungeon. But this system makes me think that later on will require many, many repeat dungeon completions. Experienced players, am I guessing right here? Combos. They aren't really my thing. I prefer abilities to have their own key, probably why I like the AP characters. But if you enjoy them, the game has a lot of them, and they are powerful. Controls. They are definitely old school. Moving with the arrow keys was a blast from the past. And I was reminded why we moved on from that. Luckily, the rebinding system felt really easy to understand and allowed me to quickly set up a control scheme that worked for me. I really liked that the game gives out XP for moving through levels quickly without getting hit. You have a rating that increases whenever you hit enemies, but decreases over time and when you get hit. The better the rating, more XP you get. Rewarding aggressive gameplay keeps you moving forward. After completing the final mission and protecting Saradin, the Nightmaster lets us know our next quest. To go outward, wrong game, and defeat Kazehaze. All our characters give a quick internal foreshadow of their motivations. The Elder, Grandfather, and Daddy. And no, I'm not kidding, that is actually the Sword Lady's line. We find a boss, and wait, we agreed on something without any bickering? It's a miracle. And then the troll ruins it by saying, "Rawr," with the tilde. I mean, there isn't an XD at the end of it, and I'm starting to ramble again. So I'm going to stop. Lots more things I could talk about, but they aren't going to change this conclusion. Is the game a bit of a mess? Yes. Will it be my forever game? Probably not. Am I worried about it becoming extremely grindy or MTX heavy? Yeah, but There's plenty of fun to be had before that happens. And the most important question, was it fun? Yes, I certainly enjoyed my time playing. The feel of combat and character variety are enough for me to see myself playing again. Thanks for exploring GrandChase with me, and I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, or night.